What's up? I'm Vin, and today I want to talk about how I broke into the 1800s in rapid chess. So the first thing I want to do is look at this game here, and this is the match that actually got me there. I was playing against a guy from Finland, Hajurako. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but this game he played d4, and I started out with an e6, b6 opening. And I'm going to go through this match kind of quickly because the first few moves we played all standard stuff here. The engine had me slightly ahead early on, and just a lot of developing moves here. I castle, my opponent castles, I get my knight into the game here, and only until now is when the game started to pick up, where we trade knights. He brings his bishop into position, and we also trade bishops. So at this point, I'm saying, let me make a grab at the center, and my opponent backs up. I push the pawn even further to kick out the knight, and now I'm just focusing on advancing my pawns to cram my opponent's space. So we trade a few more pieces here. I push the f pawn up another square. And at this point, I didn't want to trade because I didn't want to give my opponent the position with her queen. So I just focused on taking over the c file. And from here, my opponent pushes the pawn up to g5. And then this is where I have a plan to kind of break open the game a little bit. And I sacrifice my bishop here on g5. Now, the engine is going to tell me that this is a mistake. My opponent captures me back, and I throw them in check. What I didn't calculate was that my opponent could hide on f2, and in the process, they would keep me from taking the e3 pawn. But I was kind of thinking what I would play, and I know for players that are not at the master level, like 1800, we're good, but we're not master level. Most people are going to want to hide their king out of the way. They don't want to start bringing their king towards the center of the board. And that's exactly what my opponent did. He hid the king on h1. And that's where I picked up this pawn here. My opponent swung their bishop in to target g7, maybe the idea of bringing the rook over to threaten some attacks here. But that's when I decide to put my opponent in check. They run away, and then I grab the bishop. Because once we do the trade here, I could throw my opponent in check once more. He has to hide, and I take that central pawn. So now I'm up 2. The engine says here that no matter what my opponent does, like I'm still going to be 6-7 points ahead. And at this point, I feel like they're just moving for the sake of moving. And I throw my rook into position here, and that's where my opponent resigns. The engine, I played this a little bit further ahead, but my opponent resigned here. The engine was saying their best option is to block with the queen, but then once I throw my rook in front, we trade here, and now I'm more than 10 points ahead, and I'm like set to win this. So that was the game that did it. But now I'm just going to talk briefly about what did I actually do, because it took me 2 months, a little more than 2 months to go from the 1700s to the 1800s. I was stuck for a long time at 16, but for some reason, 17, even though I might backslide, I was able to climb those 100 points way faster than from 16 to 17. And one of the things I did a little different was I tried out some openings that I normally wouldn't try out. But I got the idea from watching master matches. And one of my favorite openings that I was able to learn was a response to the Caro-Kann Defense. And I learned it from watching an old Magnus Carlsen match. Now, the match that I actually watched was from when he was 13, and some other master did a breakdown of the match and gave some really deep insight into it. But it was the classical defense to the Caro-Kann, because for the longest time, against the Caro-Kann, I was playing c4. That was just something the engine had recommended as one of the best moves. But what Magnus plays a lot in his matches is he plays d4 and plays this classical response here. So then after they take, you could capture them with your knight. They swing out the bishop to threaten your knight, and then you could swing your knight onto g3 to attack their bishop. They run away. You push the h-pawn up to h4. They create a little hiding spot. You develop your other knight here. They develop their knight. And now you kick their bishop back onto h7. So they hide here, but then you bring your bishop in position to trade off, because I remember the master saying this is what you want to do because you don't want to give their bishop that entire diagonal. That's too much control of the board. So then after the trade here, a few more moves, we developed the bishop out. A lot of my games have been starting from here now against the Caro-Kann. And I'm not necessarily winning every game, but against really good players, now at least I have a fighting chance. And you can see at this point, you're up half a point. So you do have a pretty strong advantage here when your opponents are playing against this particular opening. So this is just something that I did, and I'm going to continue doing, watching other matches of much better players and trying to grab some ideas and then try them out in my own games. Now, my goals, because I can't even imagine what it's going to be like to get to the 1900s, but for this rating, what I want to focus on is pawn structures. I want to focus on like how to create like the optimal pawn structure, especially for the end game, because I'm very bad at recognizing when my pawn structure is weak or when my opponent's pawn structure is weak. I know when their pawns are double, that's a bad thing, but I need to get better at exploiting those disadvantages or knowing when my own pawn structures are weak, not necessarily when my pawns are doubled up. So that's just something I'm going to be working on, and hopefully I'll be able to come back and make a video on breaking into the 19s sooner than later. All right, well, this is going to wrap up this video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you like what you see, please like and subscribe, and I'll be making more videos like this in the future, so you could click on the notifications too so that you could follow and get my videos just as they come out. So thanks for watching.